My Eurasian video should be uploading right now. Hopefully it makes the February 14th timestamp just so it could match the other one of the theming of it being Valentine's Day. Speaking of Valentine's Day, there's only 3 minutes left in Valentine's Day. Keeping with tradition of watching Your Name, that means I'm basically caught up, and I'm trying to keep with my recordings. Looking ahead, there might be a few instances where I will have to record ahead of time, but sometimes just that's how these things go. On to the 30th season in 2006, and that was Gogo Sentai Boukenger. If only I could actually snap my fingers. And that's not a Infinity War thing, that's actually something that they do in the show. So I guess just right into the things that I like, the things that threw me off. One aspect that I liked, and it's something that they tried to expand throughout the season, just kind of to give us something to always be curious about until we find out what happens, is Natsuki, Bouken Yellow, and her backstory. Spoiler alert, long story short, she's the last of her kind, basically of an Atlantis-like sort of civilization, kind of like Superman. What I mentioned before about, as time goes on, as they go through different seasons, the writing gets better, the writing gets tighter, and things like that. This is kind of an example of one of those things where, although in my experience I haven't really encountered a character who is trying to unravel their past, but they do try to expand on it and try to pace it well throughout the season. Although admittedly, I think once we find out what happens, and it's like a little bit halfway through the season, or a little bit after halfway through the season, they don't do much with it after, but at least there's a lead up to it. So I like that. In keeping with the theme of Boukengers basically being adventurers, and that's the actual translation of what Bouken means in Japanese, I think. It's like adventure, or I think it's like Boukensha is the translation for adventurer in Japanese. So they took the root word of Bouken, of adventure, and basically think Indiana Jones. So they're looking for different artifacts that have like powers or abilities, I think, or that can advance civilization. And I like how they actually have different factions going for it, as opposed to just two sides, as opposed to just being Boukenger and one villain side. There's actually 4 different villain groups going after the different artifacts for their own purposes. Again, going back to, as seasons go on, writing and development, got tighter, and I mentioned that with Kingaman, they kind of did something similar where they have these different, like, generals, but then they, once their villain arc was done, they were cut off. But with this, it was actually like mixed and mashed throughout the season, and I like that. And they tended to have certain villain groups match up with different rangers, like, or each villain group, or as it's referenced is Negative Syndicate, has kind of a particular group of, has a particular ranger as a particular rival. For instance, the Jaryu tribe is, kind of like red lizardy people, but it's because their leader is kind of similar to Akashi Bouken Red, because he used to be an adventurer as well, but then, somewhere down the line he got corrupted with the Ashu and the Questers. They have a particular beef with Eiji, or Bouken Silver, and get into that a little bit more later. Dark Shadow had something to do with Boukenger Black, and I think there's a little something going on between Shizuka of the Wind and Boukenger Blue. I think the Godam civilization has something to do with Natsuki's backstory. So, yeah, I did like how they kind of played off of each other. And it is currently after midnight, so unfortunately the timestamp on my Magic Ranger posting does not match with what I said about hoping to have it be part of Valentine's Day, but I did start this recording on Valentine's Day, like 5 minutes left in February 14th, and speaking of which, Akashi and Sakura, or Boukenger Red and Boukenger Pink, I ship it. It's cute. They didn't really show the same levels of attraction that Doggy and Swan had, or even I think even Mega Ranger had more demonstrations of affection and attraction. But to be fair, that had a high school setting, and high school crushes are bountiful. I did like how subtle a lot of her attraction to Akashi was, because it was subtle. Like, there's an episode where everyone's picking on Boukenger Red because he's like the big adventurer of the group and he didn't pass a certain exam, and it's actually part of a mission. So everyone's teasing him, and she kind of comes and like defends his honor and kind of scolds the ones that are teasing him, and it was cute. You don't really like, even in the finale, she barely even confesses like her crush on him, but in the finale it's the first time that she actually addresses him by his first name as opposed to just calling him Chief. And she, and her big thing was that she snuck on board the ship when he was going on a big solo mission, and I don't know, it was cute. Given that this was the 30th anniversary, they did have like little post-credit scenes or like presentations that detailed the history of Super Sentai over the 30 years. I guess technically 31. And at first it started out, going through each season one at a time, but then once they exhausted the 29, 30 seasons, they started talking about different aspects of Super Sentai. They talked about the different robos, the different mechas, the different gatais, who started what, how Zyuranger started the tradition of the Sixth Ranger. I think they even mentioned, Nine Ranger started the tradition of the suitless, helmetless roll call and things like that, and it's going through, and that was pretty cool, especially since I got to experience about half of it, and then it filled me in on the first 14. So I like that. That was fun. That was cool. That was good. Very fitting for a anniversary season, and it makes me excited to watch the crossover episode that it has. So much like Gal Ranger, where they didn't necessarily have a crossover with the previous season, they have it's Boukenger versus Super Sentai, so they have a crossover with different members from the past 4 or 5 seasons. And it's actually pretty similar to the way they did it in Power Rangers Operation Overdrive. They don't bring in older legends like Adam Park. They actually kind of make their own legendary ranger for this one, Aka Red, who is pretty important in future 5, 10 anniversary seasons. So I should really get an introduction to him sometime soon. So something that kind of threw me off was, so they have this not even mentor mechanic, but they have like a mentor, and then they have a higher up, the one who's ordering them to go on these missions and, find the artifacts. And, it's kind of like Charlie's Angel. You don't know who's behind the voice. And, I don't know, I just thrown off by Mr. Voice's identity, which, she only comes at the, in the finale endgame arc as, a random character. And that's revealed at the end that she is the voice behind it. But it's well, first of all, it's a teenage girl, which I was at least expecting an adult, but a teenage girl. So it's how did she, become the head of an international organization trying to find these artifacts, and what does she need them for, and stuff like that? Maybe I missed something, and maybe I'll see that the next time I watch it. When I found out that was Mr. Voice's identity, I'm like, wait, what? It's was that always like that? Did I miss something? What's the importance of it? I don't know. This threw me off because it was pretty coincidental. At the time of watching Boukenger, and this was in August, and sadly, despite all my effort, I was still unemployed, so I was working through some more backlog, and I'd actually started watching Inuyasha. Now, the reason why that's significant is because AG Silver is basically in Inuyasha. He's a half demon. He's like a half demon hunter, and he's actually half Ashu, which is the villain group. Yeah, I'm pretty sure he's half Ashu, so he's half monster, half demon, whatever, kind of like Inuyasha. So, and there was an episode where he loses control and he feeds his demon side, and it was it's like Inuyasha. So, it's just a small thing. And again, I'm pretty sure it's rooted in some Japanese Buddhist Shinto folklore that I don't know anything about. So just into my favorite episode, or task 26, the glass slipper. Even though this wasn't a super special episode, it was just kind of another monster of the week. It had some things going for it, in my opinion. And, given the title, the glass slipper, it does play on the Cinderella story, fairy tale. And the glass slipper is one of the artifacts that they have to look for, or they refer to them as precious. And, there are reports of a woman who appears, and, if they get taken by the woman, they fall into a coma. And they thought that at first it was Cinderella, but it's actually Cinderella's stepsister. And she's essentially being manipulated and, to an extent, abused by the prince that is held within the slipper. But then, going through the episode, you find out, and it's basically resolved when, Sakura, or Boken Pink, she does go into the dream world, but she doesn't fall for the guy, because, she kind of reflects on why she's a Boukenger and why she joined Akashi in his mission. It actually demonstrates the message of the that season, and it's everyone has a treasure that belongs to only them. And Sakura was trying to find what her treasure was, and at this point she still didn't really know what it was. It actually has a flashback where she's at a shooting range because she's part of the elite JSDF. That's how her and Akashi met. And when he was trying to recruit her and he was telling her about everyone has a treasure that only belongs to them, and that's kind of what piqued her interest, because she was trying to look for that, what was her treasure. Although she doesn't necessarily figure out her treasure in this episode, she does help the Cinderella's stepsister figure out hers. They actually have the name for it, Kurolinda. And she actually helps Kurolinda find her treasure, or to, look within herself to help her find her treasure, the same way that Akashi did for her. And that's what led to Kotolinda betraying the prince, and then, breaking everyone out of their comas and leading to the defeat of the villain at the very end. I think it was just a subtle episode that they demonstrated of the message of this series, of this season, and, to find the treasure that only belongs to you. Looking back at this, you can kind of interpret it as like, pursue your passions. It seems like every season has a message that resonates with me for some reason. Maybe I'm just in a vulnerable place. I don't know. Oh, and quick side note. I don't know if I mentioned it when I was talking about, Akashi and Sakura, but I will have to say Sakura, because of, how badass she is in this episode, she's partner goals. she's SO goals. She's waifu goals to an extent, or at least for me.